Hey there, high level listeners. We are very happy to bring you another episode of our English vocabulary podcast here on High Level Listening, where we bring you side by side American and British English to help take your English to the next level. So, in today's episode, your partner or someone in your family is feeling sick, and it's up to you to take care of them. So, today we'll be talking about very common expressions and vocabulary that native speakers would use in this kind of situation.
Yes, well, sorry to hear that someone in your family is sick. Hopefully, you can nurse them back to health in no time. Yes, this is our topic for today's intermediate and advanced vocabulary podcast. It's all about taking care of someone who isn't feeling well. And in total, we'll share over 40 different English vocabulary items and phrases that you may not be familiar with. And these are all used to help someone feel better. And these are all real life, everyday spoken English phrases in the UK and in the US.
Like always, we'll teach you by reading out a short script each. I'll go first with a bit about taking care of my partner or my husband in American English, and then Mark will talk about taking care of his young child in British English. After that, we'll go back through the scripts, line by line, to explain the best vocabulary and phrases to help you level up your daily English. Okay, are you ready? Let's get started.
Okay, so Kat will read her script first. Kat, tell us, what happened to your partner last week?
Last week was rough. My husband picked up a bug that was floating around the office and eventually came down with the flu, and it hit him really hard. Fever, chills, the whole 9 yards. He was completely out of commission, so I had to pick up the slack and nurse him back to health at the same time. He had no appetite, so I made a lot of soup and herbal tea, just trying to keep him hydrated. Nighttime was the worst because he couldn't sleep with all the congestion. He kept me up half the night with his coughing and sniffling. By the third day, he was over the worst of it, but still not quite 100%, so I had to practically force him to stay in bed and rest, even though he kept telling me, I'm fine, I'm fine. Now that he's finally back to himself, I've restocked all the pain relievers, fever reducers, herbal teas, and fingers crossed he didn't pass it on to me. All right, so I was talking about my husband and taking care of him. Lots of really good language in that one. Now, Mark is going to be taking care of one of his kids. So, Mark, tell me, what happened with your little one?
The other day, my youngest caught a nasty fever, poor thing, and it completely wiped him out. In the morning, he was complaining that he felt poorly, so I felt his forehead and he was absolutely burning up. The thermometer said 38, and he was shivering 1 minute and then sweating the next. He could barely keep his eyes open. I immediately called the school and told them he wasn't coming in. I ended up working from home, but honestly, I barely got anything done between tending to him, checking his temperature, bringing him soup in bed and trying to coax him to eat something. I was completely run off my feet. Nights were the hardest, though. He kept waking up miserable, either too hot or too cold, tossing and turning, so I was in and out of his room constantly. Luckily, after lots of warm drinks, cuddles, and endless episodes of his favourite shows, his fever finally broke and he started to feel better. If he hadn't, I would have taken him to the hospital, but now I'm just relieved that he's back to his usual self. Phew. Okay, right. So we've both shared our experiences taking care of a loved one who isn't feeling well. Don't worry if you didn't catch everything we said. We'll go through the scripts again, but if you would like a downloadable file, a transcript of every sentence in this episode to take offline, you can get that by becoming a member. Or if you really want to take it up a level, you can find this in the Season 3 study pack, which has extra worksheet activities, listening activities, the transcript as well, and an ad-free MP3 version of the episode too. You can find the links to those in the description below. But anyway, like we promised, we'll go back to the start of our scripts and pull out the best vocabulary about taking care of someone feeling sick. So remind me, Kat, who was sick in your story?
Last week was rough. My husband picked up a bug that was floating around the office. Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. Now, we do use this word rough. Now, if something is very smooth or if something is kind of rough. But we can also use this to talk about our day or our week or over the evening, everything was rough, meaning it was difficult, or tough is another word that we use as well, rough and tough. Now, last week was rough. My husband picked up a bug that was floating around the office. Now, sometimes little kids pick up bugs, but you can easily pick up a bug that was floating around the office. Now, we don't literally mean an insect, although we do use the word bug as kind of a cute word for an insect. But if we talk about picking up a bug or catching a bug, especially at the office or at daycare or at school, we're talking about getting sick. Now, my husband picked up a bug that was floating around the office. This is the best visual, I think, because even though these are microscopic little bacteria and viruses, you can imagine that someone didn't cover their mouth properly and it is literally floating around the office.
All
So
the germs in the
yeah,
cloud floating
exactly.
around. Yeah.
Exactly. So to float is to kind of lift up into the air. So my husband picked up a bug. Now, this sounds like it was his choice, but it's not into your mouth like that. But it really wasn't his choice. When you pick up a bug, it's just something that was floating around the office, right? And he eventually came down with the flu. Now, when we're talking about a bug, we usually talk about things maybe we don't know what they are. Maybe it's a fever, maybe it's a cold. A stomach bug is quite common as well. This is a really good word to use when you're not quite sure the name of the illness that you got. Why am I sick? I don't know. I caught a bug or I picked up a bug. But when we talk about the flu, this is influenza, right? The flu is very particular. So a bug could be any sickness. The flu, very particular. And it really hit him hard. It really hit him hard. Now, when something hits you hard, Mark said something like wiped him out. It made him so tired that he couldn't really get up and get out of bed. It really hit him hard. Fever, chills, the whole 9 yards. Fever, if you have a fever or you're feeling feverish, this is when the temperature of your body is too high, okay? In the United States, it's 98.6 Fahrenheit. And Mark, what is it in the UK, a fever?
If it's over 37, then you probably have a fever. Yeah.
Okay. So fever, chills, even though your body is hot, you feel cold. So that's the chills. And then we have this phrase at the end, the whole 9 yards, meaning every single thing you could get. The whole 9 yards. Okay. So he's got the fever, he's got the chills. He got everything. He got everything. Okay, Mark, you're waving your American flag.
Yeah. That's an American phrase. The whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards.
Everything, every symptom you can imagine.
Yeah.
I can't think of an equivalent or a similar phrase in the UK, but the whole 9 yards, measuring things in yards just feels a bit more.
The whole
American.
thing, maybe. Yeah, I guess the whole thing, but it is a phrase that we use in the United States. The whole 9 yards, the whole thing, all of it.
The whole shebang.
The whole shebang. The whole shebang.
Everything, right?
Now, I'm sorry to hear that someone in your family, Mark, was quite sick. So who was sick in your family?
The other day, my youngest caught a nasty fever, poor thing, and it completely wiped him out.
Oh, poor thing.
I know, right? Poor thing. Yeah, let's start with that. Especially when we're talking about a child or a young person suffering, struggling, feeling unwell, or just having a tough time, we say, oh, poor thing. You can say it to them as well. If your child says, oh, Dad, I don't feel well, say, oh, you poor thing. Go back to bed. We don't go to school today. So yeah, poor thing is showing sympathy for someone who is sick. Adults can say it to adults, but especially parents say it to their children as well. Oh, you poor thing. So the other day, or recently, my youngest, that's my youngest child, but you don't have to say child, just my youngest, my oldest as well. My youngest caught a nasty fever. This is the collocation when you get sick. It's like someone threw it at you and you catch it. You can catch a virus, catch a cold, catch a fever. We don't know where it came from, a classmate, a stranger, somewhere. But yeah, in the past, I caught a nasty fever. Nasty, a bad or a strong, very, very hot fever. Poor thing. And Kat said it hit them hard. I said it completely wiped him out. To wipe something is to erase. If you're in a classroom and they write on the board and they wipe it out, they erase it. And that's what the fever is doing to your energy. It is wiping out your energy. You can't get out of bed. You can't move. You cannot do anything. You could say it about yourself. I am completely wiped out. It can even be after like a lot of exercise or just a busy day. If you've got no energy, you are wiped out. But especially if you're sick and that's taken away all your energy, it completely wiped him out. Poor thing. So back to your side of the script. How bad was this flu?
Honestly, he was completely out of commission, so I had to pick up the slack and nurse him back to health at the same time. No, I don't regret having to do this, but it was tough. It was tough. It was real rough last week. So he was completely out of commission. So just like Mark's little one, he was completely wiped out, completely out of commission. Out of commission just means that you're out of work. You don't work anymore. This doesn't work, right? So my husband was completely out of commission. He couldn't do the dishes. He couldn't help me clean the house. He couldn't help me take care of the kids. So I had to pick up the slack. Okay, so normally my husband has jobs that he does around the house for me. But if he's not there, no one does those jobs. So we call it the slack, okay? And slack is kind of when, oh, I was going to do the same thing. So normally this is our life. Everything gets done. But if he's not there, things start to kind of, oh no, they're kind of falling apart. So to pick up the slack means that I had to do his work and my work at the same time. So I had to pick up the slack and nurse him back to health. We use this phrase quite a bit. To nurse someone back to health means to take care of them. Get them their medicines, take them to the doctor, make sure they're sleeping okay, and make them feel better. Now, I'm not a nurse, but I can nurse someone back to health. So I had to pick up the slack and nurse him back to health at the same time. I'm not mad. I'm not mad.
It's a lot of work.
I'm not
It's
upset.
not easy.
I'm not upset. I don't regret it, but I am tired. Really tired.
Mhm.
Okay, so your little one probably picked up something from school. How did you find out? What was wrong?
Well, in the morning, he was complaining that he felt poorly. So I felt his forehead and he was absolutely burning up. The thermometer said 38. He was shivering 1 minute and then sweating the next, and he could barely keep his eyes open.
Oh, poor thing.
Poor thing. So how did I find out? In the morning, he was complaining that he felt poorly. Aha, I thought you might do that.
hmm
Yes, if you feel sick, if you feel unwell, in British English, you could say, I feel poorly. I feel quite poorly. Now, it
Poorly.
has an ly, but it's not an adverb. So
Mm.
in this case, I am poorly. He is poorly.
Yeah.
He felt poorly. It's not an adverb.
Okay.
But yeah, it just means sick. This is a word that I use more often with young people and children. Saying the word
Okay.
sick or you are ill can be kind of scary for children. It's
Mhm.
also why we use the word bug, I think, because
Yeah.
bug sounds a little bit less scary to kids than virus or disease. That sounds like, you might make your child quite frightened if you use those words in English. So we have softer language for it, and poorly is an example of that. So he was complaining, like, Dad, I don't feel good. I feel poorly. He was complaining. So I felt his forehead. When someone is sick or you think they have a fever, you can touch their forehead, this area, and he was absolutely burning up. So I touched his forehead and it was very, very hot. When someone is sick, mostly because of a fever and their temperature is very high, we say burning up. Often when you touch their head, you go, oh, wow, you are burning up. And maybe they're sweating as well. So when their temperature's high and you can feel it through their skin or their forehead, they're burning up. The thermometer, the little device you put in their mouth or sometimes in the armpit, said 38. That's using Celsius in the UK. And it was a fever because, like Kat said, you could be hot and then cold. And he was cold because he was shivering. When you get very cold and your body's shaking a little bit, you are shivering. Maybe after a cold shower or, I don't know, it's windy and cold outside, you're shivering. So he was shivering 1 minute and sweating the next. So he was changing very quickly between shivering 1 minute and sweating the next. I don't know, like he was laughing 1 minute and then crying the next. We have two very opposite feelings. He was shivering 1 minute and sweating the next, and he could barely keep his eyes open. So he was trying to open his eyes. He could barely do it, just a little bit. So these are common symptoms of a fever. Poor thing. Say it again.
Poor thing.
I know. Anyway, back to your side. So besides the fever and the chills, did he have any other symptoms?
Well, he had no appetite, so I made a lot of soup and herbal tea, just trying to keep him hydrated. So he had no appetite. This is often quite common as a symptom. Mark asked about any other symptoms. So if you have the flu, how do we know that you have the flu? Well, you have kind of these common problems, these common symptoms that sort of as a group mean, oh, okay, you probably have the flu. So a fever, chills, no appetite, maybe coughing, things like that. These are symptoms. So he had no appetite. So I made a lot of soup and herbal tea. Herbal tea is usually without caffeine. Maybe it has some ginger in it. Oh, are you going to say herbal? Are you going to say herbal?
Yes,
I knew it.
Yes.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say herbal. Okay. So in American English, we say herbs and spices, and we do not say the H sound. So that H sound that goes out, we don't need to say it. So we call it herbal tea and herbs and spices. What do you say, Mar?
And in the UK, we do pronounce the H. So it's herbal tea, herbs and spices.
Very nice. So I was honestly just trying to keep him hydrated. Now, hydration is very important, meaning you drink a lot of water. Sometimes your doctor might say fluids. So soup, right? Soup isn't just plain water. It's got other liquids in there. So fluids and liquids, you need to stay hydrated. So I'm keeping him hydrated, making sure his water level is nice and high so he doesn't get too dry or just when you're sick, you just need lots of fluids, right? So I'm just trying to keep him hydrated. What about you, Mark? What did you do first?
So after I felt my son's forehead and he was burning up, I immediately called the school and told them he wasn't coming in. So if you have a job or your child is supposed to go to school and you cancel and you tell them you cannot go, the phrase we use is coming in or come in. When you pick up the phone and call your office and say, I'm sorry, I can't come in today. I did this for my son. I can call the reception at school and tell them that they should not expect my son. He's not avoiding school or being naughty. He's at home. He's sick. So he isn't coming in today. You can do this for someone else. If your partner has to go to work, you can call their office for them and say, hi, sorry, he isn't coming in or she can't come in today. Okay, so back to your side and your poorly partner. Did things eventually get a bit better for them?
I mean, eventually, but nighttime was the worst because he couldn't sleep with all the congestion. He kept me up half the night with his coughing and sniffling. So sometimes you'll see on medicine packets, daytime and nighttime. So nighttime was the worst, okay? Kind of the worst part of the whole thing. So nighttime was the worst because he couldn't sleep with all the congestion. Congestion. Oh, I can feel it. Congestion is when fluid and liquid starts to get into your nose, under your skin, under your eyes. It can even you can start to feel it in your ears as well, because everything's connected, all right? All your nasal passages. And when you have liquid or fluid inside of here and it feels kind of, and you really can't breathe sometime, this is congestion. Congestion. And I am congested. Congested. Sometimes you get it here as well in your chest. So you've got the congestion and you are congested. And he kept me up half the night with his coughing and sniffling. Again, I'm not mad at him. It's been a rough week, okay? So he kept me up. I was up. I'm up. If you keep someone up, you stop them from sleeping, okay? So, hey, are you awake? Yeah, I'm up. I'm up. Meaning I'm awake. I'm awake. So he kept me awake. He kept me up half the night. Half the night. So we could say he kept me up all night, or he kept me up half the night. Half the night probably sounds like I did get some sleep, but not that much sleep, right? So he kept me up half the night with his coughing and sniffling. So sniffling is when you're breathing because you're, all the liquid coming out of your nose, right? So you're sniffling. And coughing is when the air is coming out of your throat here. One more one that he might have done as well is sneezing. So we've got coughing, sneezing, and sniffling. I think sniffling is a good one because it's
different from sniff, right? If you sniff something, it's like you want to take the fragrance or the smell, like sniff some flowers or sniff this coffee.
But if you're sniffling, yeah, exactly, then something's stuck in your nose and you trying to get it to go back up into your nose.
I know. Being in a library or a cinema, somewhere quiet, and one person
during flu season, forget about it. I know. Just go back home. Please go home. And it's so gross to be in a public area sniffling.
Right.
So what else did you do to help your little one?
So I told the school he wasn't coming in, and I ended up working from home. But honestly, I barely got anything done. Between tending to him, checking his temperature, bringing him soup in bed, and trying to coax him to eat something, I was completely run off my feet. So Kat was busy taking care of her partner. Me too. I was busy as well. I ended up working from home, but honestly, I barely got anything done. So I called my office and I told them my son was sick. So I opened my laptop and I started working from home. So I tried to continue my life, but honestly, I barely got anything done. I said barely earlier. My son could barely open his eyes, just a little. I barely got anything done. So I didn't achieve a lot of work. I didn't finish many tasks because I had to take care of him. One word I used to take care of someone when they're sick is to tend to someone. You'll often hear this phrase more in a medical or sickness and health situation. If you cut yourself and go to hospital, a nurse will tend to your wound, or a doctor might tend to your injury. But it can also be for smaller sicknesses and just fevers at home. I tended to my son, so I took care of him. And part of tending to him was checking his temperature. So using the thermometer and reading the little display or the number. You read the number. So I checked his temperature. And another thing was bringing him soup in bed. If you give someone food, drink, or medicine in bed, we tend to use the word bring. Like, hey, I brought you breakfast in bed. Happy birthday. Or if I'm in bed and I'm sick, I'm like, oh, can you bring me some soup? We don't use give or, we don't use give. It's just bring. Bring you something. in bed. So between tending to him, checking his temperature, bringing soup in bed, and trying to coax him to eat something. Coax is a funny one, COAX. And this is when I'm trying to encourage you to do something. Like, come on, please eat some soup. I know you don't have an appetite or you're not hungry. Please do it. We can watch
No.
some of your favorite iPad shows
No.
if you eat this soup.
No,
You might
I don't
also
want
hear
to.
this word with animals too. If you want an animal to like come closer to you, then you can coax them out with some food, put food there, and then they come out and you can catch them or something. That's what
Kids
I'm
are
trying
animals
to do.
sometimes. My
Basically,
husband was
that
acting
means.
like an animal as well. I had to coax him back
Mhm.
into bed as well. Yes.
Exactly right. So I had to motivate him or encourage him or promise him some reward. Anyway, I was completely run off my feet.
Hmm.
Is that a British phrase then?
That doesn't sound very common in the US. Run off my feet. I can kind of get from the context what it means, but I haven't really heard that one as often in American English.
Right. It just means I was very busy. I was working, I was sending emails, jumping on a call, going upstairs, tending to my son, going to the kitchen, making soup, writing another email. I was doing lots and lots of things. I was run off my feet. This isn't only for use in when someone's sick. You can just have a busy day at work, going to lots of different rooms, appointments, and at the end of the day, I'm tired. I was run off my feet today. Okay, so back to your side of the script. How long was your partner sick for?
Let's see, 1, 2. Yeah, so by the third day, he was over the worst of it, but still not quite 100%. So I had to practically force him to stay in bed and rest, even though he kept telling me, I'm fine, I'm fine. Okay, so he was sick about 3 days, and by the third day, so at the third day, we usually say by the third day, he was over the worst of it, okay? Usually when you get sick, you don't just magically get better, but you get over the worst of it, meaning you're starting to feel better, okay? And in comparison to the worst of it, you do start to feel like you're getting better and better. So by the third day, he was over the worst of it, but still not quite 100%, or if I say it really quickly in an American accent, 100%. Still not quite 100%. So I had to practically force him to stay in bed. You know that feeling where you've kind of missed a few days, you're already feeling guilty about being sick, and then you start to feel better, you're over the worst of it, and you think, okay, I got to do stuff, I have to work, I have to get stuff done. But I had to force him, or basically, he wanted to get out of bed, and I have to keep him in the
No,
bed.
Go back
I-
to bed.
Sit back
You
down,
stay there.
get back. Yeah, you're acting like a child. Go back to bed. So I had to practically force him to stay in bed. So we are staying in bed again. We don't have to say in the bed because we kind of just have one, and we've lost over time. We've lost the word the. So you have to stay in bed and rest. Okay, just rest. Drink your fluids, rest, stay in bed. Even though he kept telling me, I'm fine, I'm fine. So this is kind of why when people say, hey, how are you? I'm fine. That it doesn't really mean fine. It doesn't really mean fine. It doesn't really mean what everybody thinks it means. You could probably say, yeah, good, I'm okay, I'm okay. But if you say, I'm fine, are you fine? What's wrong? No, I'm fine, I'm fine.
They're sneezing and
no.
coughing.
You are
I'm
not fine.
I'm
You are the
fine, I'm
opposite of fine. So I think that's one way that I know that you might be lying to me, right? He kept telling me, he kept saying to me, he kept telling me, I'm fine, I'm fine. No, you are not fine. Get back in bed. Get back in
I
bed.
know. There are some people who hate being sick or just don't
Right.
believe that they can get sick, or they
Mhm.
find being sick really boring. So they're just, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I can go to work. Even when they're really, really sick, they can't do
Yeah.
it.
Go home. Go to bed.
Yeah, please. Yeah, your company might send you home because you're endangering the rest of the staff.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the hardest part for you, Mark?
Nights were the hardest, though. He kept waking up miserable, either too hot or too cold, tossing and turning, so I was in and out of his room constantly. So, similar to Kat's answer, nights were, or the nights he was sick were, nights were the hardest, though. He kept waking up miserable. So he was falling asleep and then waking up again, and then falling asleep and waking up. He kept waking up. Maybe he only slept in short stints. And how did he feel when he woke up? He felt miserable. So he kept waking up miserable. You can just stick an adjective on the end. He kept waking up crying. He kept waking up happy. He kept waking up delighted. Or kept waking up sleepy. But he kept waking up miserable, really sad and unhappy. And he was miserable because he was either too hot or too cold. So again, 1 minute he was shivering, the next sweating. And if you sleep badly, if you're trying to rest like you should, but you can't sleep because you feel terrible, we say tossing and turning. I think that means just rolling in the bed from one side to the other. This can be for children and for adults. If you cannot get comfortable when you're sleeping, you're tossing and turning. Maybe you slept really badly last night. You can explain, I slept terribly. I was just tossing and turning. Maybe I should have turned on the air conditioning, or it was really cold. If you just sleep badly, you were tossing and turning all night. So I was in and out of his room constantly. So I was going in, tending to him, then leaving so he could sleep. Then he woke up, so I went back in the room. I was in and out. It's another phrase for when you're very busy. This can be for a sick person or just being busy in general. I was in and out of the kitchen, preparing dinner. I was in and out of the office, doing work. I was in and out of his room constantly, a lot. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of your script now. It sounds like he did get better in the end. Thank goodness he's feeling better.
Yeah, thank goodness. I feel like I have more sympathy for your son than I do for my own husband. But
Poor thing. Yeah.
poor thing. And my husband, you kept me up half the night.
Flu. Yeah.
Go back to bed. So now that he's finally back to himself, I've restocked all the pain relievers, all the fever reducers, all the herbal teas, and fingers crossed he didn't pass it on to me. So now that he's finally back to himself, I'm back to myself. She's back to herself. We're back to ourselves. That means that we've healed 100%. We are back to ourselves. We feel normal again, right? We've got our personality back. We feel happier again. We're no longer sick. So now that he is finally back to himself, I've restocked all the pain relievers. Now, to stock something is to buy it and place it in your house, okay? And if you are stocking something, you have the items, right? So at a grocery store, they will stock items. So they have these items. Well, if we use them up or people buy a lot, you have to restock the items. So we used up all the pain relievers, fever reducers, all those teas, right? So I restocked all the pain relievers. Pain relievers would be anything from Advil, Tylenol, aspirin. This is a pain reliever. It's usually a little pill that you can take. And we can also use a pain reliever might also be a fever reducer. So if your fever is really, really high, you might take something to reduce or lower your fever. If you have a high fever, you want to lower it or reduce it. And then I restocked my herbal teas. Now, I am using the S there, herbal teas, because I have lots of different kinds, right? I've got orange, I've got ginger, I've got black, I've got some other ones. I've got all sorts of teas. Now, you can go ahead and add that S if you have a variety of different boxes, all right? Like I have lots of teas to choose from. And fingers crossed. Fingers crossed in, at least in American culture and British culture too as well, it means hopefully, okay? Fingers crossed, or I need some good luck, okay? So in fingers crossed, he didn't pass it on to me. I hope he didn't get me sick, right? Because we live in the same house. I had to nurse him back to health. I really hope he didn't pass it on to me. He's feeling good, but where's the bug? It's floating around the house.
Where
Maybe,
did it
maybe
go?
yeah, where is the bug now, right?
It's behind
So
you. Yeah.
it's don't breathe, don't breathe. So, and fingers crossed he didn't pass it on to me. Really, really, no, honestly, like fingers crossed.
Yeah. How often do you hear, oh, I got it from my husband. Oh, I
Ugh.
got it from my partner. Yeah, it usually
Yes, don't
floats
do that.
around the house before
Yeah.
you
See,
can get it out
I
to
have
someone else.
no sympathy for my husband. Just at all, you know?
Big baby.
I'm
Thanks a
so
lot.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the man flu, more like it, you know? But
Yeah.
so, Mark, your poor little guy. What happened in the end? Tell me he's okay.
Survived. He lived. Luckily, after lots of warm drinks, cuddles,
Mhm.
and endless episodes of his favorite shows, his fever finally broke and he started to feel better. If he hadn't, I would have taken him to the hospital. So the way I tended to my son was lots of warm drinks. That could be teas, herbal teas, warm milk, just fluids to help him feel better. Cuddles. A cuddle is a cute way to say a hug. If you hug someone and you hold them very closely and it's in a very loving way, you cuddle them, or you give them a cuddle, like you give them a hug. Do you not use that word in the States then?
We do a little bit, but we prefer the word snuggle. Snuggle.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Snuggle.
I can hear it, cuddles, but I hear it more in a British accent. And I would say snuggles, even with little kids. I want to snuggle with their little kids, sit close with them, or with your cats or your dogs. They want to snuggle with you on a cold night.
Sure. Yeah, of course. And then when kids are feeling quite sick, they may be quite needy. They need some love and some affection, some TLC. And yeah, cuddles are a good way to give that. Even if it would make me sick, you'd still do it for your child. So warm drinks, cuddles, and endless episodes of his favorite shows. Yes, so there's not a lot you can do when you're sick. You just feel terrible in bed. One way to alleviate the boredom is to watch something on TV, or these days on an iPad. So I gave my son his iPad, or I turned on the TV and we could watch his favorite shows, maybe cartoons, animations, or something like that, just to take his mind off of being sick, to distract him. And finally, his fever finally broke. So when the fever starts to go away, when the fever starts to cool down, and you're past the worst, hottest part, we say the fever broke. Like if I dropped my phone and it broke. So the fever will start to cool down and he'll start to feel better. If he hadn't, I would have taken him to the hospital. This is the third conditional, sometimes the most difficult conditional there is. This is when I think about the past and I think about changing the past. My son is okay now. Everything's fine. But when I remember what happened, if something had changed, I would have made a different decision, or there would have been a different result. So if he hadn't felt better, I would have taken him to the hospital back then. This didn't happen. My son is fine, his fever broke, but I can talk about a different past and a different past result with a third conditional.
Oh, how do you both feel now after that long ordeal?
Now, I'm just relieved he's back to his usual self. So, similar phrase to what Kat said. If you're feeling back to your usual self, you feel fine. You feel normal again. Your personality, your energy is back. I'm relieved. I'm just relieved. It's always scary when your child gets sick. You might feel a bit helpless. You might feel stressed. Do I take them to the doctor? Is this serious? Am I a bad parent? All of these things go through your head. But he's okay now. I'm just relieved.
Well, I'm relieved as well. So we've gone through all of the great vocabulary. Let's go ahead and do a quick review of the vocabulary that you learned in class today, because there was a lot of it. This would be a good time to practice repeating after me to work on your American accent and to practice saying things out loud. Rough, a bug, floating around, came down with something, the flu, hit hard, a fever, chills, the whole 9 yards, out of commission, pick up the slack, to nurse someone back to health, no appetite, keep them hydrated, he kept me up, congestion, congested, coughing, sniffling, over the worst of it, not quite 100%, force them to stay in bed, rest. I'm fine. Back to himself, back to myself, back to yourself. Restocked. Pain relievers, fever reducers, herbal teas, fingers crossed, pass it on.
Okay, and here are the keywords and phrases from my script. Caught a nasty fever. Poor thing. It completely wiped him out. He felt poorly. He was absolutely burning up. The thermometer. He was shivering. He could barely keep his eyes open. Tending to him, checking his temperature, bringing him soup in bed, coaxing him to eat something. I was run off my feet. He kept waking up miserable, tossing and turning, in and out of his room. Cuddles. His fever finally broke. I'm relieved. He's back to his usual self.
So just to let everyone know, the Season 3 High-Level Listening Study Pack is available right now in our store. It has PDF worksheets for this episode, bonus listening activities, ad-free MP3 versions, and PDF transcripts of every single Season 3 episode. The link is in the description below. We really think it'll help you get the most out of these episodes and take your English to the next level.
Yes, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Don't forget that you can practice with us here on YouTube. We read and reply to every comment we get here. So tell us which phrases today were new for you, or when was the last time you had to take care of someone else who was sick and what happened?
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that everyone feels 100% and back to themselves. We'll see you very soon for another episode here on High Level Listening.